Chapter 15, Sticky Notes, starting on page 413. Okay, so now let's talk about groundwater. So groundwater is a huge source of our drinking water, and the number one pollutant in groundwater is underground storage tanks. So a lot of companies, and well, let's think in our town, gas stations, all that gas is underground in storage tanks. And it can leak and get into the soil and then drip down into groundwater. So the number one problem is, and it's not just gas stations, but other companies store things underground. And this picture shows them being built. Other causes of groundwater pollution is sewage, agricultural runoff that has nitrates, pesticides, bacteria. All those can get in our groundwater. Groundwater pollution stays for years. It's very difficult for groundwater to flush itself out. Another pollution issue is heavy metals used for mining, and metals that are part of burning fossil fuels can reach the groundwater and impact our drinking water supply. So these are all types of pollution in groundwater. One of the laws that helps preserve our water is the Clean Water Act. And so here's the provisions of the Clean Water Act that you need to know. It's illegal to discharge water pollution from a point source without a permit. So if you're a company and you want to dump your waste into the water, you have to get a permit first to do that. And they don't issue very many permits to do that. It sets standards for industrial wastewater. So if you're a company and you have a lot of waste in the form of water and pollutants and heavy metals and whatever, you have to lower that amount legally. It sets standards for surface water in our rivers and lakes with contaminants. So now we have water managers. Castaic Lake has a lake manager, checks for contaminants. Now Castaic Lake is a man-made lake, but now all of our regular rivers have limits for contaminants. And then it funded, back in the day when it was first passed, it provided money to fund wastewater treatment plants, which are also called sewage treatment plants. So a lot of communities didn't have them, and so they would just dump their raw sewage into rivers and lakes. And so the money from Congress helped these small communities build them. And then all of these provisions maintain the integrity of our nation's water. And so that was the point of the Clean Water Act. All right, on the next page, let's do the next law that you need to know for water, the Safe Drinking Water Act on page 414. So this one is not in your book, but you have to know it. It requires local water suppliers to test and monitor drinking water with local funds. So we'll take a look at in one of our labs what these parameters are for the Safe Drinking Water Act. So your tap water, it has to fall under limits under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And those limits are more strict than the limits for bottled water, just so you know. Okay. So now let's talk about wastewater, sewage. So one of the facts you need to know is that human waste contains a lot of phosphorus, which can cause eutrophication. So human sewage treatment plants tend to focus a lot on phosphorus. That's just a little factoid you need to know. Okay, so let's go over to page 415 first. And so as you're studying, make sure that you study these pictures and what's going on with these pictures, and down at the bottom is a caption. And so the first and second, 1 and 2, is primary treatment of wastewater. 11% of the U.S. only does primary treatment of wastewater, which is kind of gross. In the middle of 1 and 2, I put it here as 1A because it's not in your book. If you have a lot of turbidity in your water, what they can do is they can put something called a flocking agent, which is kind of a chemistry thing. One chemical that does this is called alum. What it does is the flocking agent clarifies the water because the particles clump to this flocking agent, and then they settle to the bottom, and we can also screen them out. So it's part of number 2, a primary clarifier is getting rid of these suspended particles as well in our water. And again, I put it as a 1A because it's kind of in between 1 and 2 here, and it's not in your book, but it is on an AP test question. So I wanted you to make sure you knew this. Okay, and then 3 and 4 on this picture, the aeration basin and the secondary clarifier are secondary treatment. So this is where you get rid of a lot of the wastes, and 62% of the U.S. does both 1, 2, 3, and 4. So they do primary and secondary treatment of wastewater. And then number 5 is additional treatment, which we actually do here. So 27% of the U.S. do all 5 steps, which is primary, secondary, and tertiary treatment. So we run it through filtering again, and then we disinfect and dispose of it. So in Santa Clarita, we dispose of our treated wastewater into the Santa Clara River. And that treated wastewater is lovely and nice and clean, and it's used by farmers downstream for avocados, oranges, strawberries, etc., before it empties into the ocean. We also have sludge. So sludge is part of digested waste, and then it's compacted into sludge. And so sludge is also called biosolids. So the AP test sometimes uses the word biosolids instead of sludge. It's after secondary treatment, and this leftover from wastewater, so mostly it's water left over, but it is some solids that are digested, is sent to farm as fertilizers for non-food crops, so like cotton or animal food. It can, like to feed cows and chickens that we're going to eat, so we can grow their food with it. But it can have heavy metals, so this is one of the problems with using that sludge, because there's heavy metals in our wastewater. In people's bodies, people eat things like mercury and tuna. It's filtered out through our liver and kidneys, and it becomes part of our poop. Well, that poop goes to the wastewater treatment plants, and the wastewater treatment plants don't get out heavy metals. They also don't get out pharmaceuticals, and this is kind of a new issue. So in our wastewater, all of the drugs that people take, legal drugs too, so pharmaceuticals, all of our prescription meds, our wastewater treatment plants are not designed to get rid of those things yet. We may need to engineer better wastewater treatment plants to get rid of pharmaceuticals and also heavy metals, and also now there's some other chemicals that people are concerned about as well. All right, and then the last page for this chapter on 416. So we can build wetlands to do this. So this Arcata Marsh, which is in Northern California, is a wetlands for a little town that they build instead of a wastewater treatment plant. And it can actually do this. It can treat our wastewater without, the wetlands can do the exact same thing. And so then it also provides habitat and other benefits of wetlands. And so it's kind of a win-win. And then the last thing to know is that water that does not go to wastewater treatment plant is our storm drain water. So rain, or when you wash your car, or any water that comes out of the hose at your house that goes down into the gutters, and in the gutters is storm drains, they flow directly to our river and the ocean. They can have trash in it, they can have bacteria from things like dog poop, they can have toxins. It's illegal to pour things like paint or oil down the storm drains, but people do, and it is not treated before it gets to the ocean. So this is a problem that we know about, and we know that it's going to cost millions or billions of dollars to fix this problem. But we can do it. All right, that's it for chapter 15.